Did you know that your ego can ruin your progress with learning Chinese? I can prove it. I spent my first year making zero progress, over 1,000 hours wasted, because my ego prevented me from doing what actually works. So after coaching hundreds of people and teaching thousands more through our courses, I've identified 5 specific ways that our egos destroy our progress. So as we go through each ego trap, notice which ones make you feel a little uncomfortable, because those are probably the ones that are hitting closest to home. Now, if you want a proven system that helps you overcome these exact ego traps and make insane progress with Chinese, get our free course and community in the description. You get specific guidance, proven methodology, and access to, of course, our awesome community of thousands and thousands of learners like you. Now, let's start with the trap that held back my progress the most, especially at first. So picture this. You were good at school. Maybe you learned Spanish or French, so you think you understand how languages work, even though you don't actually speak fluent Spanish or French. Plus, of course, Chinese is massively different from the Romance languages anyway. But none of this changes anything or deters you, and instead of researching how language acquisition actually works, you just keep doing what feels right based on what you think you know about language learning. And every time you hit a wall, you wonder why your progress has stalled, why others seem to be succeeding. But whatever approach you're struggling with, at some point in time in the learning journey, everyone hits a breaking point, right? Where you're just not making enough progress, maybe 2 years in, a year in, still unable to even have basic conversation despite working quite hard. And then you finally realize, oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong here. And by that point, you've already wasted a ton of time, right? So this is the know-it-all trap. That moment when you finally realize maybe you do need to do something different is quite humbling. It kind of breaks the illusion of being smart enough to figure it out, and letting go of that illusion and trusting others who have done it before you is what finally allows real growth to begin. And I'm not necessarily saying that the most cited research is therefore the most reliable, or to listen to the person with the most YouTube subscribers or the least hair that talks about language learning. Certainly don't do that. But just realize that there's lots of people who've already done what you're trying to do that know more than you, right? Polyglots who speak multiple languages fluently, for example, researchers who study language, teachers with thousands of successful students. Start there. Your ego wants to be the hero of your own story, right? But heroes follow guides. Luke had Yoda, Harry had Dumbledore. Find a guide that looks qualified, go all in on their approach, and then go from there. When I stopped looking inwardly and relying on my own ideas of how to learn language, despite only speaking one of them, and I started to research other people and look at other people, listen to other people, that's when I started to have breakthroughs in my learning. Now let's examine another common trap, one that can set you back years if you're not careful. So you might come across a Chinese grammar pattern that you don't understand. So you dive down deep into the rabbit hole of YouTube and ChatGPT to figure it all out. Use dictionary lookups for every single word that you don't understand in a paragraph or a story that you're reading. Or maybe you're obsessively repeating the same tone or tone combination because someone said it doesn't quite sound right. This is the need to understand everything ego trap. So fluent speakers or experienced language learners know that you don't need to understand everything you encounter in language learning. If you're constantly looking up words, that's probably a signal that your vocabulary isn't ready for that content yet. So focus building your foundation first, like at least 5,000 words minimum, ideally, eventually 10,000 common words. Second, you don't master grammar or pronunciation through conscious study. Right? You master grammar by seeing, hearing, and using the language in context. That means reading, listening to, and repeating example sentences a lot, thousands of them. So I learned this the hard way. I spent months analyzing grammar rules in English, noting them down in a notebook, trying to consciously decode the difference between le or guo or yi, shen shen jiu, these different grammar structures in the language in various contexts. It kind of drove me crazy. Then when I switched approaches, everything changed. I started consuming example sentences, reading them, listening to them, thousands of them. And after seeing these characters and words that I was learning in context many, many times, I just developed a natural sense of grammar, just like native speakers do, just like I did in English. And here's why this need to understand everything trap is so seductive, right? Grammar analysis feels good. It feels productive. It feels safe. It feels logical. It gives you the illusion of control. But real language use is fast and messy and subconscious. You can understand every rule about a structure and still freeze up when you need to use it in real conversation, right? So I see this constantly in our community, people asking detailed questions about this grammar pattern that they've never actually used, or why is this word here? Why is that character here? And we always explain it. We're always happy to give an explanation, but after a while, we always add on a little thing at the end that just says, this is not the best way to spend your time. Conscious understanding does not equal actual ability to speak and understand the language in real time. Really, it's just your ego keeping you comfortable, making you feel in control. Conscious analysis like this feels like progress, it feels comfortable, but actually most of the time it's not progress. Using the language quickly and accurately, that's progress. Making mistakes and learning from them, that's progress. Your ego can't handle ambiguity and mystery very well. It loves clear answers and hates uncertainty. But the thing is, language doesn't really work that way, right? Sometimes you have to trust the process before you understand it. So drop this need for total comprehension of everything, and you'll get more exposure with less anxiety. So let's say that you now trust the process and you begin to accept this confusion and ambiguity. This is where your ego attacks you from a different angle. So let me know in the comments if this sounds familiar to you. You know your speaking isn't good enough, so you avoid speaking practice. This is the fear of mistakes ego trap, and it kills progress too. So that fear of making mistakes, here's what's really happening underneath all that. You're demanding perfection from yourself. You mark yourself way too harshly when you do flashcards, for example, causing endless reviews. A lot of clients I know do this. You write characters 20 times in a row to get them looking pretty instead of just moving on. Seriously, ugly characters don't matter at all and are the least of your problems. You stutter and stumble when speaking because you're analyzing every word, making sure each one is pronounced perfectly and in the right order. This trap is especially dangerous because it kind of feels virtuous. You think you're being disciplined. You're actually wasting time and energy, though, while creating unnecessary stress. So here's the truth for you. Mistakes are very powerful. They're important. They're actually essential for progress. That's how your brain learns. So when you make a mistake and you correct it, or you hear feedback from audio or from a native speaker and you correct it based on that feedback, you create a stronger memory than if you just gotten it right the first time. So some people go straight to speak with native speakers, right? They get frustrated from making mistakes and feeling embarrassed and kind of awkward. And they convince themselves that they're not ready. They just don't like the pain of making those mistakes. And what this does is it creates a negative cycle where you just practice and speak less and less. So here's how you turn this into a positive cycle. Practice on your own and make mistakes in private first. Use techniques like shadowing and retrieval practice with thousands of useful Chinese sentences. So you've probably heard of shadowing. It's just when you speak along with the audio, kind of like you're singing along to a song, but with a kind of a lag behind. And retrieval is a fancy way of saying produce Chinese sentences from a thought, a feeling, a question prompt, or maybe an English translation. That's my favorite way of doing it. You just get familiar with hundreds or thousands of example sentences first through lots of listening, shadowing practice, reading them as well. That's really helpful if you read and listen at the same time. And then you create flashcards with the English direct translation of the Chinese sentence on the front, and then you try and produce the Chinese yourself from memory. And you have the Chinese text and audio on the back of the card. That's your feedback, right? You hear it and you read it. Was I correct? No. How wrong was I? And then you read it out loud again just to correct yourself. You mark it as wrong. That's how you make mistakes and correct them. You can do like 10 or 20 new cards a day trying to produce the Chinese from the English and just keep that habit up for a while, and you will see massive improvements in your speaking. So this is really hard. And even if you're a higher level, you're going to make lots of mistakes with new sentences, and that's absolutely fine. It's completely normal. Very quickly, you won't though if you continue practicing with the same sentences. So whether it's with shadowing or active recall, the key here is to make your mistakes in private and then have regular, real conversations with native speakers. And because you're practicing so much outside of these real interactions, you'll improve every time pretty much. And that will motivate you to keep doing practice and keep having speaking sessions and it turns what is usually a negative cycle into a positive one. And just remember that your ego wants to win the game, right? But language learning is not really a game you finish, so it's more of a skill that you develop. So stop trying to perfect everything and just focus on improvement. So let's say that you start doing this and you begin getting comfortable with mistakes and imperfection. But here's what's kind of devious about ego. Just when you think you've beaten it, it adapts. And so this next trap, it's something that looks like being studious and thorough, and it's actually the opposite. So I started off with Chinese in actually a really smart way by accident. I spent well over 100 hours using a listen repeat program, Pimsleur, mastering a bunch of phrases and repeating out loud every day a ton. This made my pronunciation really good from the start, a great foundation in the language, and I highly recommend that anyone starts language learning this way by speaking from day one, doing lots of repetition, listening and repeating of common phrases and words. But here's the kind of sneaky trap that I fell into. This success caused me to become so arrogant and think that I could learn a language in a year without actually researching how to do it, especially a language as different to English as Chinese is. It made me think I was some sort of language learning genius and that Chinese would just be easy. And so this is the ego trap of overconfidence from early wins. Ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? You know, when someone has a little bit of knowledge or skill, they massively overestimate their competence, where they don't know enough to know what they don't know. So here's a pattern. Early wins trigger overconfidence. You think you've cracked the code when you've barely scratched the surface, and so you skip the fundamentals that would actually get you more fluent. This is also one of the things that can cause the first ego trap of just not listening to other people or looking for expert advice when it comes to learning Chinese or anything. The thing is though, truly advanced learners, experienced language learners, are humble. They recognize how much they still don't know and are always open to listening and trying new things. So I'm a relatively high level in Chinese right now, but I'm still open to new ways of learning and to the idea that my way can still be improved upon. And this has benefited me and my business greatly. Now I want to share a final ego trap with you that I fell into as well, which is very important to avoid. And it's a rather painful one to talk about. So the final trap, the one I often see our new members fall into, is a real confidence killer. All right, so imagine this. You're scrolling through Reddit, for example, and you see someone who made a post who started after you, but made a video of themselves speaking fluently in Chinese. Or you watch a YouTube video of someone who learned Chinese in 6 months. You feel behind, you feel frustrated. Or maybe you feel superior to beginners and you feel ahead of them, right? So this is the comparison trap, and it kills your progress. Language learning is incredibly non-linear. Everyone's on a different timeline, a different path with different resources, different prior exposure, different goals, different obstacles coming up in their lives. I learned this from watching thousands of language learners over the years. The ones who focus on other people's progress make less progress themselves, or at the very least have a worse time and feel more anxiety for no good reason. And the ones who focus on their own consistency, their own progress, make the most progress overall. So remember that line from Baz Luhrmann's Sunscreen. That's a great song. The race is long, and in the end, it's only with yourself. So I can't think of a better piece of wisdom to apply to language learning and many things in life. It's your race. And the only comparison that makes any sense is that of your present self to your past self. And one more key insight to remember here is that our ego is not evil. It's just trying to protect us. But sometimes it's protecting the wrong things and in the wrong way. Pride, a sense of control, a need to be right, none of that helps you speak fluent Chinese, really. The more you try to protect your ego, the more likely you'll trigger the exact problems you're trying to avoid. But when you let go, you allow yourself to be humbled by challenges, to be vulnerable, to make mistakes, to not understand things, to trust the process, you'll get to fluency way faster and be generally way happier. Now, if you really want to overcome the biggest ego traps, thinking you can figure it out on your own, watch this video next. It shows you the exact proven system that's helped thousands of our members crush Chinese.